For centuries, the story is often told the same way: Muslim armies advancing, borders expanding, empires falling in their wake. But history is rarely that simple. In the middle of the 11th century, it was not Muslim forces marching deep into Europe. It was the Byzantine Empire, one of the longest lasting Christian empires in history, mobilizing a massive army and moving east towards the territory of the Seljuk Turks. They were determined to reclaim a land they believed was rightfully their own and to crush the threat of the new Muslim empire. The year is 1071. The location is Manzikert. Let us take a step back and set up our context. Who were the Seljuks? The Seljuks came from a nomadic horse people from Central Asia, related by blood and ethnicity to the Mongol Empire. And after embracing Islam, within 3 generations, they had conquered many of their Muslim neighbors, including the powerful Ghaznavid dynasty that we discussed in the last episode. Under the grandson of Seljuk, Tughrul Beg, they ruled an empire that included Khorasan, western Iran, and the entirety of Mesopotamia. However, after the death of Tughrul Beg, the Seljuk Empire came to an end everywhere except in Anatolia. Seljuk power moved on to Alp Arslan, and Alp Arslan was the one who captured the Byzantine province of Ani. The Byzantine Empire, frustrated by the frequent incursions by the Seljuks, assembled a large army under the Emperor Romanos to establish security under the Byzantine Empire's eastern frontier. Hence, in the spring of 1071, Romanos led this army into parts of what is now Armenia, along the southern branch of the upper Euphrates River. Near the town of Manzikert, and today it is pronounced Malazgirt in Turkey, rugged terrain, he divided his army, which was composed of mercenaries that included a contingent of Turkmen. So ethnically they were Turk, yet they were fighting on the side of the Byzantine Empire. And he sent ahead some of them to secure the fortress of Akhlat on the nearby Lake Van, and others he took with him into the fields of Manzikert. Learning of the Byzantine foray into his own territory, Alp Arslan hastened to Manzikert, where he confronted the emperor's army. Whatever the exact size of the Byzantine army at Manzikert, there seems to be general agreement that the army which the Emperor Romanos left Constantinople with in the spring of 1071 was unusually large, and that he was fighting with considerably fewer troops at the battle itself. Even so, he must have had a clear numerical superiority over Alp Arslan, which explains both the fear of the Sultan to engage with the enemy and the firm decision of the emperor to fight. Romanos abandoned Manzikert in an attempt to reunite his forces with the group besieging Akhlat. Trapped in a valley on the Akhlat road, he neglected to send out scouts to assess the enemy's position, and the Turks fell upon him. Romanos was weakened by treachery within his own ranks. His Turkmen troops went over to the Seljuks in the middle of the night before the battle, and one of his generals, Andronicus Ducas, perceiving that his cause was lost, actually abandoned course and fled with his men. These and other factors allowed the Byzantine army to be destroyed by the Seljuks, and Romanos, the emperor, was himself wounded and taken prisoner. Many of the professional elite troops of the Byzantine Empire perished at the Battle of Manzikert. Here, the books of history mention a tale, and people differ whether it is real or not, of a conversation that took place between the Sultan Alp Arslan and between the Emperor Romanos IV. It is alleged that Alp Arslan asked Romanos IV, "What would you do if I had been the prisoner and you had captured me?" And Romanos said, "I would have executed you. I would have killed you and given you nothing in return." And Alp Arslan allegedly remarked, "As for me, I will follow my religion and my teachings, and I will free you, and I will give you gifts, and I will return you to your people." And whether this story is true or not, without a doubt, Alp Arslan actually did treat the Emperor Romanos with a lot of dignity, and he took care of him, and he protected him, and he in fact did send him back to his people after, of course, giving some conditions and making sure that there would be no further infringe into his own territory. However, it was not Alp Arslan that brought about the end of the emperor. On the emperor's return, actually his own people, his own nephew, he was overthrown. There was a coup d'etat. He was blinded and he was killed by his own political enemies from within the Byzantine circles. This internal division, which led to the overthrow of Romanos, was actually one of the primary reasons that led to the collapse of Constantinople's authority across so much of the Anatolian plateau. And this opened up the door for further conquest of the Seljuk, eventually leading the way for the Osman Turks, the Ottoman Turks, to rise up and eventually capture the famous city of Constantinople in 1453. But that is the story of another talk. To conclude, the Byzantines' loss at Manzikert opened the doors for the Turks to firmly establish themselves in Anatolia and beyond. And although Alp Arslan was eventually killed on the banks of the Oxus River on a campaign to subjugate the Qara Khanids of Transoxiana, his son Malik Shah continued what his father had started and was soon the sultan that was acknowledged in the khutbah from the borders of China to the extremities of Syria and from the northernmost lands of Islam all the way to Yemen. And here we need to point out that the modern land of what is now called Turkey, it is called Turkey because the Turkic tribes, beginning with the Battle of Manzikert, carved their way out. In the days before these conquests, this land was called Anatolia. And the Turkic people were actually coming in from a land east to this. They're coming in from a land that is bordering the lands of China and Mongolia. It was the Battle of Manzikert that opened up the doors for the migration and for eventually the land of Anatolia to be inhabited by the Turkic people, and hence the land itself would be called Turkey as it is now called. Although the Byzantines were weakened after the Battle of Manzikert, this was not the final blow and they were not done yet. In fact, the Byzantine Empire sent out a call to their fellow Christians in the West, to the Roman Christians, urging them to come to their aid. And what would follow because of that call, as a result of that call, would be enshrined in history as one of the most vicious wars in all of mankind's history. And those are the wars of the Crusades. And that too is the talk of another series of lectures. There are so many lessons to learn from the Battle of Manzikert. Of them is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses unexpected peoples to present the ummah. The Seljuks were not known to the majority of the ummah. The Seljuks were a small, rather fringe dynasty, and they were recent converts to Islam, newcomers from Central Asia. They weren't an old Islamic elite, and they were from a tribe and from an ethnicity that had not yet contributed to the ummah. And yet, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala raised them to defend Islam against internal and external threats. And again, we see the Muslim inclination to peace, with the Muslims seeking a peaceful resolution to the battle, even when they had the upper hand, and the Roman emperor being given a safe passage after being captured. This was not something that the Romans would ever have done had they conquered the Muslims. Of the lessons as well is empires rarely decline overnight. The Byzantine Empire lasted over 1,000 years, and while the Battle of Manzikert is indeed one of the most iconic and important battles that signaled the beginning of the end, it still took a further 3 centuries for the Byzantine Empire to actually come to an end. Of the lessons that we also learn here is the reality that we see throughout all of these lectures, the rise and fall of dynasties, the rise and fall of political empires. There is no empire, there is no ethnicity, there is no nation state, there is no dynasty that lasts forever. And every single person and every single power must go up and down. It is only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who is al-awwal and who is al-akhir, who is al-hayy and who is al-qayyum. Every other power and every other being has only a short period of time, and it comes and it rises and then it ceases to exist. we should learn our lesson from it. Just like all of these powerful dynasties are nothing but names, so too a time will come when you and I will be nothing but names. And we need to make sure that when that time comes, we have established enough credit with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala